over to 7 o'clock, and we are going to be live.
Yep.
I think I see my little red box up there that lets us know that it is almost showtime. Almost showtime. I'm
I,
missing Victoria already.
I
You know,
know.
we, this is
It's
second
not the
week.
same.
Yeah, second week that we have not have not had her with us.
Was that you who dinged?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Just
and
checking.
that's why I'm pulling out my phone to figure out why I did. I'm not sure. I am not sure at all. But
Okay.
I think we got everything lined up. We're going to. Yeah, I got something different to share for my weekend review this time. So I'm
Oh, do
glad
you?
that I
Okay. Well, good.
do. I actually do. You know, I didn't have to dig too far to say, oh, I don't know what I'm going to talk about this. I think I got something, and I'm glad to be able to share it. And it's kind of in line with parts of our friend's book, our author's book. So
Well, very cool.
yeah, yeah. So I'm glad to be able to do that. You have. I wanted to ask you too, and this isn't for the show, but how's your little sister doing?
Oh, she's great.
She's great.
She's 3 years old, so she running my dad she's doing what she's supposed to be doing. My dad, on the other
So,
hand, well, yes,
okay, we got it. We got it. Well, I think we are ready to go. So, Mr. Allen, whenever you are ready, we can
yeah.
go ahead and get started.
All right, I'll hit the button. You guys have a great show. Be here in about
Thank you,
Thank you.
5
sir.
minutes. All right.
Well, hey there, Ruth.
Hi, how are you?
How you doing, girl?
I am well. I'm happy for another Sunday, another show. I'm happy to
Yep.
be here.
Another, just another. What's the psalmist say? Just another day that the Lord has kept me.
That's it.
And that is where I am today as well. And we already have some listeners that are chiming in. Good evening, Nikayetta. How are you? Glad to have you in the house. And our other author buddy, there's Trelyn Usry. Good evening to you, Trelyn. Glad to have you in the house as well. And hopefully, we'll have some folks coming in from other countries tonight and we'll be able to address them formally and welcome them to an evening with Authors Up.
Yep.
Glad to be here. Glad to be in the house.
Yeah.
Glad to be able to have another opportunity to introduce everybody to an author, and I believe she's a new author.
Yes.
So she's got a great book, and we're going to be talking to her about her book tonight. Hey there, Angie Oliphant. That's our South Carolina connection. I like to call her whenever I see her pop up. So glad to have you in the house tonight, Angie, as well, as well, as well. Well, we're going to get started as we usually do. But first thing we want to say is we're missing our compadre.
Yes, we are. She's a little under the weather,
Yeah.
but still hanging on strong.
The
So
three musketeers have become the two musketeers
for
tonight.
another week,
But
yes,
we're gonna try to hold things together and hold them up so that she'll still own us when she's able
yes.
back. And she won't be saying, "Who are those two crazy women?" So we're going to do the best that we can to bring
Yes,
you
we
the
are.
best show that we can this evening. But we always start with our week in review. And so I'm going to go ahead and start and then let Miss Ruth share with you. Um, Interestingly enough, when I saw the title to the book tonight, which is Divine Promises, Trusting God's Faithfulness, it reminded me of what I did last weekend. And last weekend, I was in Surf City, which
Okay.
down near the beach. And it was really a trusting God moment for me because everything was ready. I've been talking with the hosts of this women's conference since February. They asked for me to be their speaker for the day. And they were talking about being bold and having strength, the fact that you matter, and trusting God. And I thought, boy, if I had had Debbie's book, I could have said, "Look, just call Debbie Adams, man. She's got all of this laid out." But here was the thing. I was all set to go, and things had been quiet and all, but then I looked at the weather report, and the
Mhm.
weather report talked about storms.
Yeah.
Storms. And I thought, I don't want to be driving in some tropical storm going to the beach. What in the
Yeah.
world? I didn't want to do that. But I have a friend, and her saying is always, God would not give you a divine appointment and then trick you with lack. He's
That's
going
right.
to provide everything that you need. And I thought, you know what? He's going to protect me. He's going to keep me safe. I'm going to make it through this storm, and I'm going to go and fulfill my assignment. And we stayed with a lovely couple, very, very nice people. But I'm going to tell you, that Friday night, whew, it rained all the way down there. Not torrential rain, but it rained all the way down there. But that Friday night, the the husband of the of the host couple that we were staying with just kept saying to me,
Uh-huh.
"Don't look at the trees. Just don't." Just
Oh,
don't
oh,
look at the treetops. Don't look at the treetops because
did you?
I kept peering out because the wind was
Uh-huh.
howling, and man, the treetops were just, I mean, just the wind just had them doing their own dance. I'll put it that way. And every time I would go to peek, he'd say, "No, no, 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 don't, don't look at the treetops. Don't look at the treetops." And that became the best advice I could get. But the next day, I was still concerned because I thought, I hope that we're not having to drive back
Yeah.
in the rain. And right before lunch, right before 12 o'clock, the piece that I was reading had to do with the storm,
Hmm.
how the storms will pass. And I looked out the window and it was bone dry, and the sun was just as bright as it could be. And I was like, just thank you, God, because you got to trust Him. And when you
Yeah.
trust Him, He never lets you down. He is so faithful, and He always comes through. So that just took care of everything for me. Peace, calm, just loving the fact that he is such a good and a gracious and faithful God. So he showed up for me, showed out for me, and all was well. So I thought, oh, I
Oh,
can't
that's
wait to
awesome.
share. I got something to share on Sunday. So that took my week in review right there.
All right.
So what about you? What did you have on tap last week?
I was thinking about it and I was like, well, my weeks have been not running into each other, but they're a little typical at this point. And I thought, well, do I really want to share that? Not really. But I came across a podcast last week that I do want to share.
Okay.
It's called Mean Book Club. And the four hosts sit there and I think rip apart might be a nice way of saying it.
Ooh.
New York Times bestsellers. And I mean, from the last 40, 50, 60 years. So it is not so as much that they're being mean, but they're going through the book. They're talking about the character development, all of it. And it is just a hoot to listen to. And a lot of these are like an hour plus. Some of them are like almost 2 hours. But I got through like 4 episodes and I was looking through the list of it and I was just like, this is I mean, it was just a delight to come across because now it feels I have something to fill my drive time and all that other stuff. But it's called Mean Book Club. And again, it just, it's just something to listen to, but it was just I guess something that I needed because it filled up um filled up my week and it gave me something to just enjoy. And I think, we need a lot more of that. Sometimes you need a show, sometimes you need a podcast, something just to distract you a little bit from the things that are going on. And this podcast certainly did that. So called Mean Book Club.
Do you think they were mean?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
I think,
Honest in their critique?
what's that?
I said just honest in their critique.
Oh, well, I mean, yes, I do think that they were honest in their critique. Their thing is, well, okay, these books are considered bad, either badly written or the plot is bad. It doesn't make sense why they're on the New York Times bestseller. And it was just, I thought that they were just going to rip it apart. But
Mhm.
really, what they did through is they went through and critiqued it. So even the last one that I listened to was The Shack by William Young, and you can have your opinion about it. They're not necessarily Christian, but the way that they spoke about it, they went into character depth that I didn't even think about.
Okay.
So when they went into it, they were making legitimate points about the story itself, about the characters, about that kind of stuff. So, and as a writer, it and even an editor, it really makes you think, because you want to make sure that you put your best story out there. So how is it being perceived? It obviously they weren't the audience that was select when the author was writing the book, but
Mhm.
how is your book going to be perceived? And that's something to definitely think about. Yeah, okay, so I'm a nerd when it comes to this kind of stuff, but it definitely, you do have to think about this as you're writing. You're not just gonna, oh, my book is for everybody, have fun. No.
Were they all from different walks of life and at different ages, or are they all kind of in
I'm still looking into that. So it sounds like they're more from like two generation types. So
okay. Okay.
it's definitely worth checking out. They have like 100 plus episodes out there. So
Oh well, how often do they come on?
weekly.
Weekly. Okay. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. I was a little surprised by that. So,
Yep. Yep.
but
Looky here,
hi, Victoria.
Victoria.
Yep.
Hey, Queen Victoria, we miss you, girl. We'll be
Yep.
glad when you'll be back with us. We'll be
Yep.
glad. We'll be glad.
Yep. So that was my week and my highlight of my week.
I gotta
So
check that out.
yeah. So,
And
but
see.
we have a wonderful guest tonight.
Yes, we do. We do. We do. Our guest tonight is Debbie Adams, and she says that she has always loved to read, and her love of reading came at a young age with her dad, and he would take her to the local library. She's traveled to many places around the world through the words in books. She loves helping others, even as a young child, and it is something that she continues to do. By writing books, she hopes to bless others with her words. Debbie says, my love of reading books and God's leading is what led me to writing. Her favorite colors are pink and purple. She loves football, flowers, and the ocean. Boy, that's a trio there: football, flowers, and the ocean. She also loves animals and has a tuxedo cat named Jazzy. Debbie says, my faith is in God, and He leads me every day in everything that I do on this road called life. We're going to take a little break right here, right now. But when we come back, you are going to have a chance to meet our author of the evening, Debbie Adams, as she tells us about her book, Divine Promises Trusting God's Faithfulness. So we will be right back. Take a brief break right here and hang out with us. Meet
Mhm.
Debbie. Before you get started, Ruth, I said Debbie Allen and not Debbie
Yeah.
Adams. Me, Debbie.
Hi,
Hi,
Debbie.
hi, ladies. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, of course. We are so happy to have you, and we're glad you could join us tonight. We look forward to talking about your book.
Yes,
Great.
yes.
So let's actually start with that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your book, Divine Promises?
Well, this is my book, so everybody can see a picture
Yep.
of it.
Yay.
Let's see.
And it is about 10 of God's promises. God has probably over thousands. I don't know exactly how many, but over 1,000 promises in His Word. And so God spoke to my heart. This is my second book, and He spoke to my heart about writing a book that also included my testimony. And you ladies have already read my book, so you know I have a great testimony of faith. And I wanted to help other people to see that whatever they're going through, to lean on God, because God promises that He will always be there and He will never leave you nor forsake you. And sometimes I have felt God even carrying me, not walking beside me, but carrying me. And so that's basically what this book is about, to help others in their journey of life and to, guide them into whatever direction they need to be going.
Okay. All right. So you said this is your second book. How is this book different than your first one?
The first book, I self-published that on Amazon, and it is about getting a healthy life, but it's not like your regular diet book. It is getting healthy God's way, and I talk about all of your parts of your body, from your hair to your brain to your stomach to your muscles, and how God created each individual part of our body to connect with each other and work, in cohesion, with each other.
Okay.
And so this one is more on my testimony, even though it's still another faith-based book. And I feel like that's what I've been called to write, is faith-based books. And so they sort of go together, but then this one is a little bit different than the other one. And the first one, I said I self-published, and this one I used a hybrid publisher.
Okay.
And I have gotten a whole lot more, people asking about my book, with him helping and him showing me how to market, my book in different ways. And my publisher is Michael D. Butler, if anyone needs one, at Beyond Publishing. And they are a great company to work with. Just want to throw that out there.
Okay. So did you find the two journeys, were they similar enough? Was it easier just to go with a hybrid publisher?
Yes, they were similar. But as far as the marketing, that was my first book. I had no idea about marketing. And with your part, if you're an unknown and writing your first book, you need to self-publish on Amazon just to get your book out there. But I decided, or not I decided, but God opened a door for me to meet Michael through a friend of mine that has known him for a long time. And we just sort of connected, and, and God told me, you need to publish your book through his company. And I mean, it's worked great.
Okay. That's
Let me
good.
ask you, for those who don't know, explain what is a hybrid publisher. What do you consider? What is a hybrid publisher?
There's a self-publishing, which I've already talked about. There's a traditional, and then there's a hybrid. The traditional is just your traditional publisher, that will do your book, and it costs a whole lot of money, that a lot of people don't have. But a hybrid is somebody that will do everything online. Like my book is not in local bookstores. In the traditional publisher, that's what a lot of those do.
Mm-hmm.
And so mine is on every bookstore online. You will find my book, and then the hybrid, they also market stuff online, and it's like doing this podcast. I mean, the traditional, I don't know any traditional publishers, but I know people that have went through traditional publishers, and they're not doing podcast. But Michael said that Michael Butler said that we need to do podcasts to get our name out there, to get the book out there. So we will go from an unknown to, oh, I know that author.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about your book then. Your life serves as an example for a lot of these promises. How did you choose what you would write about?
I sat down and got the chapter titles, and I did those based on all of my life experiences. I have a testimony of going through cancer. And we had talked about earlier, went through the tornado, and I just I just wrote down every life experience that I wanted to include in the book. And I found a Bible verse that went with it.
Mhm.
And because at the top of every chapter, there's a beginning verse. And then that's how I came up with my chapter titles, based on what experience that I was included in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about the promise of healing. You talk about your aunt, and you wrote, on her last few days, I told her that God could heal her body, and told me that he wasn't going to do that. It was like she knew he would heal her by taking her to heaven. And that's not normally, when you talk about religion and healing and things like that, that's
Mhm.
normally not um, our first thought. So
Yes.
why don't you talk about that chapter, talk about your aunt, just talk about healing.
There are several types of healings, and sometimes God does decide that the healing, his healing, is going to be in heaven versus the healing here on earth. Which, if it's his will, he will heal us here on earth, so we can continue to do, whatever, his will is for us to do. In my aunt's case, she was sick the majority of her life. Even as a child, she started having seizures. And, she had, I don't know how many surgeries. She finally got over the seizures, but then, it was other health issues. And the past 5 years, I mean, we had gotten very, very close. And then when I found out she had the cancer, she was dying. And I kept praying, to God, please heal her, which he did. I mean, he took her home and he healed her. But us being left on earth, we are selfish because we want them to still be here with us.
Mhm.
And that broke my heart. And God knows I cried so many tears, but in the midst of all of my tears, I still felt his presence surrounding me.
Mhm.
And, that's his promise of, taking care of us. The peace that, normal women don't, understand unless you have Jesus and you know what that peace that passes all understanding is.
Right.
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 Okay. All right.
So true.
So let's Were you a writer before your first book?
Yes, as I was growing up, in my intro, you know, it was mentioned that I went to the library with my dad, and that's what started, my writing and everything. But I used to write little small stories as a child, and we lived out in the country, and I would go up into the barn loft, just me and the cows and the hay and God. And I would have a piece of paper and I would just write stuff down.
Yeah.
And so, God has a plan for our lives, even as a young child, that we don't even know until we get adults. And so I think that He was, getting me ready way back then for
Mhm.
what I'm doing now.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So so then you have plans to continue writing.
Yes, I already have an idea for my next book.
Okay. All right. So how long does it take you to write a book?
Um, this one took about, I guess this one took about a month, maybe a month and a half, not very long.
Okay. Okay. So what is your writing schedule like? What's your process like?
It's in the beginning, I'd seek God's will. It's like, okay, what words do you want me to put in this book? What do I need to put in this book? What direction do I need to go?
Mhm.
And even the other day, I was, I work at home and I'm sitting here working, and he gave me words. He gave me about 3 sentences for my next book that I'm
Mhm.
going to do. And so, I just stop my work, and then I have a notepad on my iPhone. So I just start, typing that in there. And that's how I do it.
Okay.
I get God gives me what I need the basics of what I need to put in the book. And then I will spend maybe an hour after work, typing it up. And then I'll work on the weekends,
Mhm.
3 or 4 hours. And then it's usually finished, like I said, in a month and a half.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that, Debbie. I'm going to toss you over to Andrea, and she's got a few questions for you.
She just tosses me around week after week, Debbie, but it's okay. I did want to follow up on something that you said when you were talking about going up in the loft and just writing short stories and things. One of the things that we have found with authors and writers is a difficulty in sharing
Mhm.
those, especially early work. Did you share those short stories that you wrote when you were a child? Was there a time when you would sit down with your dad or sit down around the table and share what you wrote?
The only person I did share with was my mom, because we were talking about that, I guess, a few weeks ago, how I would write, growing up. And the writing style that I have now, it's it's funny thinking about it, but the writing style that I have now, she said it's the same writing style that I had back then as a child.
Hmm.
Because she
Wow.
said, yeah, she said what you wrote and that I read, it was like I was in your story. And that's basically how I write books, because I want to write as if I'm talking to the person, like I'm talking to you ladies tonight.
Hmm.
Mhm.
What is the name of your first book?
It is Unlocking the Code to Bliss, a Southern Belle Secret.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Okay. Okay. Unlocking the book. Good. Okay. Okay. I wanted to make sure that I got that out there and found that out. Now we all know, and I like the fact there is so much in your book, in terms of not just your testimony and those kinds of things, but going back to the word and the scriptures that you mentioned throughout
Mhm.
every chapter, and some lead you into other scriptures. You may be talking about your chapter on strength, but it might lead you to a scripture on trust or whatever. It is, it just is all encompassing. I guess I can put it that way. And I was curious as to what made you choose those 10, because you've had an interesting life. You've had an interesting testimony. And I want you to share a little bit about that, the cancer and the tornado and those things. But what made you settle there? What made you rest on those 10 in particular? Because as I read it and looked at other scripture references, for example, you could have gone in any number of directions, just because of who God is and your relationship with him. But what made you settle there on those 10?
These were not my first choice. When I started writing this book, I rewrote the first chapter 3 times because God kept directing me, and he's like, no, I don't want you to go that direction. Then he would take me another direction, and then it's like, no, that's not. And then when I came up with this, that's when I got total peace. It's like, okay, I can finish the rest of it. This is it.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I do include, even though I might be talking about the promise of security or whatever, I do include other promises in there.
Mm-hmm.
The verse that I put in there about trusting the Lord with all your heart and leaning not into your own understanding.
Yeah.
When I had cancer, that is the verse that God gave me. And I think that might be why I put that in there. And the promise where he says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. That is my favorite promise of all times.
Mm-hmm.
I love all of God's promises, but that is by far my favorite, because anybody that knows me knows I'm getting in some kind of trouble somewhere. So he's going to have to come bail me out one way or another.
I know there's a quote that you have in there and says, if you don't feel peace, God is telling you to go in another direction. And I like that too, because a lot of times we struggle with, am I doing this the right way? Am I doing his will? Am I going where he wants me to go, saying what he wants me to say? And we go through all of that, but it is when you get to that point of relaxing, that relaxing in God, that, just sitting in his presence and still, that's when that peace that passes all understanding, as you mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
Then they know that you are headed in the right direction. Now, I want to ask you I want to go in 3 different ways here. So, because I want you to have the opportunity to read from a section of your book. But you mentioned a writer's camp that you said changed your life. And tell us just a little bit about that camp and the kinds of things that you gained from being a part of it.
About 3 years ago, I started following Michelle Moore Winder on Facebook. It was mainly a political thing. When all of that COVID stuff happened, it was mainly a political. And come to find out, she is a Christian lady, and she is also an author. So she had written a book, Rock Your Red Carpet. And so she did a book club on Zoom, I think for about 3 weeks. And so anybody that finished the book club, she was given a retreat in her home state of California, where all the beautiful beaches are. And so I thought, and she told me, she said, you need to come to this retreat. And at that point, I hadn't ever written a print book. And I thought, yeah, I would love to, but that's too much money. And I was thinking, ain't no way I can do this. And so long story short, God worked it out and pretty much just told me, look, you have the money, you can afford this because I want to make a way, which he did, and you need to be there. And so I went to California. I'd never been on a plane by myself. I'm usually with my husband. And there's that peace that passes all understanding. When I was on the airplane, only God got me through that trip. And so went to her retreat, and it was for 3 days. And she gave us the basics of how you put your thoughts together to create a book. And she taught us how to do the chapters and how you should start each chapter. And, she was the one that taught us how to self-publish on Amazon.
Mhm.
And she went through the process. You need to have a book signing. You need to put your story like in the newspaper, which I did all of that. And I got a lot of great sales in the beginning on my first book because, I was out there, I was doing everything and that, she had taught us.
Mhm.
And so I used that as my learning experience when I started on this book. I did some things a little different,
Mhm.
but I mean, it was basically the same.
Mhm. Good. I know I have been to some writing retreats before, and it does boost your confidence, I think,
Mhm.
because when you talk about not being out there alone, it is good to be with other writers and hear their experiences as well as to, the ups and downs of this thing called being an author. So
Mhm.
it was good to know that that was helpful to you as well. So I want to turn it over to you because we want to hear your voice. We want to hear you read a little bit from your book, and then depending on how much time we have left, then we'll see if we can hear about those tornadoes, all those things. So have at it, Debbie. What do you want to read to us tonight?
Okay, I'm going to read from chapter 2, and that's the one where I talk about my testimony and the when I got my cancer. And chapter 2, I titled "The Promise of Redemption: Restoring Brokenness." And anyone that's been through cancer or any kind of disease, your body is kind of broke at that point.
Mhm.
And so the Bible verse I had at the beginning of the chapter is Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. And he definitely directed my path through this time that I went through. And so now I'm going to read the chapter to you. What comes to your mind when you think about redemption? Webster defines redemption as to free from what distresses or harms. There are many promises from God about redemption and restoration. How many times have we gone through something and wondered how it could ever be fixed or how life would ever be the same? We might even try to fix things on our own before taking them to God. I've done that plenty of times.
Yeah.
When God should be our first source of help. Believe me, I've tried to fix many things before, and when I finally gave up and let God take over, everything turned out so much better. God's power through his promise of redemption will restore brokenness, heal hearts, and breathe a new life into our existence, even if we thought there was no chance of repair.
Mhm.
I'm sure you have heard the saying that you're either in the valley or on the mountaintop. There was a time in my life that I wondered what was going to happen next because for about a 2-year span, it seemed I stayed in the valley. Something seemed to always be happening. Our preacher always said that you're either going through a storm, you just came out of a storm, or one is headed your way. And that storm lasted for 2 years of my life. It wasn't that I was doing something wrong. I was in church all the time, helping out, singing in the choir. I was reading my Bible and praying to God daily. Just because you're going through a storm or some situation in your life doesn't necessarily mean that God is punishing you, because we're tested throughout our lives. Sometimes God will even use us with what we're going through to speak to others by showing them our faith. I do believe that God was using me to speak to someone else by showing them that my faith was in God and not in myself.
Mhm.
Obedience is a key part of God's testing, because sometimes he will test our faith in him. James 1:3 says, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. I've always been the cheerful, happy person who always had a smile. However, during the long storm in my life, I felt as though my life was upside down at times. However, through it all, God changed me for the better. It all started when I got cancer and my husband left me. I had always been healthy, and suddenly, out of the blue, I got cancer. When the doctors told me the news, I felt like someone had stabbed me in the heart. Anyone that has had cancer knows what I'm talking about. God knew it was going to happen even before it happened, because it was all in his plan. At the end of my cancer treatments, my husband decided to end our marriage, and it was like a truck had run over my heart. I felt like it had shattered into a million pieces. I kept my trust in God, even though I was having a hard time finding a reason to smile. My life had always been easy. There had been no major problems at all until this point. So I was very unsure of what to expect next. Through this, I learned that God will always help you with whatever you're going through. And even when you think you can't handle it, be assured that God can and will. The one thing I did know was that God was on my side no matter who else was or wasn't. I had to lean on God and trust him, for my life depended on it. If you can't trust God, who can you trust?
Mhm.
I knew I would get through this storm with God's help, and he held my hand the whole way. Looking back now, 14 years later, I'm thankful for God's promises. Hebrews 13:5 says, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. And like I mentioned, that's my favorite promise.
Mhm.
God never left me. I felt his presence very clearly in my life. You might remember the poem, Footprints in the Sand. Well, the last verse in that poem says, when you saw only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. I believe the Lord carried me a lot in those 2 years of trials. If it hadn't been for my Lord, I know I wouldn't have made it. God loves us and wants to help us. All we have to do is call out to him, and he will be there.
Amen. Amen. Let me tell you something, Debbie. What I really like about these the book and your chapters, and even as you were reading, and I think the listeners will agree as well. Um, there is always something in there where I can see my life,
Mhm.
that I can identify with. I may not have had. Good evening, Freeport, Bahamas. Glad to have you with us
Yes.
tonight. But there, I may have been through another sickness. I may have been through another trial. There may have been something else that happened in my life that makes me say, "Oh, okay, I remember. I remember." When I reached out to him, I remember when I called out to him. I remember when this happened or when that happened, and that is something that resonates throughout your book, throughout every chapter. So readers, when you get the book, which is what our friend Victoria always says. When you get the book with that expectation that there's going to be something in each chapter that you can identify with, that is going to strengthen you, that is going to encourage you, that is going to lead you from one of God's precious promises into another. And I that just helped me. That helped me. So I believe that when people read it, it will help them as well. Ruth, you think we got enough time for Debbie to go through a little bit of her tornado experience?
Oh yeah, no, I think we need to hear that.
Okay. We're going to give you just a few minutes there because we are rounding out here, but I do want you to talk a little bit about that tornado testimony, as I put it.
Okay. Back, I don't know how many years ago it was. It was when I was married the first time. And my husband had taken our car and to go get the oil change. I was home alone with my dogs, and I can't remember if I had Jay, my cat, at that time or not. But I had all my fur babies, and so I looked outside, and it was getting all stormy. And then somebody had called me and said a tornado is coming, and so I'm like, okay, I have to get ready. So I got our biggest walk-in closet. I got my pillow. I got my Bible. I got the radio and my cell phone and the dogs, water and food. And I was ready. I got everything all prepared in the closet. And so I started praying, and they didn't know what was going on. And I started praying, and I was like, dear Lord, you know, a tornado is somewhere near this area. I said, and then I told him, I said, just keep us safe through the storm. And he did. I heard what sounded like a train. I've always heard that a tornado sounds like a train. I've never been through a tornado until this one. And I heard what sounded like a train. My dogs got this fearful look in their eyes. And I said, dear Lord, you know what's going on. Take care of us. And it wasn't maybe a minute, and that sound went away. And so I sat in the closet for a few more minutes, and then I heard, you know, on the radio that I had in there that the tornado had went on, you know, elsewhere. And so after my husband came home with our car, because he was stranded at the car place, and we were outside talking to our neighbor, and our neighbor said that he was looking out the window, and he said, I saw the tornado sitting on top of your house, and then it just moved. And wow. I thought, okay, that was the hand of God right there. That's all it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah, that couldn't be anything else.
Mm-hmm. Those experiences don't forget. You might forget a lot of things going through this life, and the twists and the turns and things that happen, but that you don't forget. Don't forget. And to know that your neighbor had seen that or changed something in your neighbor's life as well. As well. Oh, Debbie, I tell you what, I am happy to stand in or sit in for Victoria and tell folks to get the book. Get the book, because there's something in there for everybody. There's something within every promise that Debbie has chosen that is going to touch you, that is going to reach you, and that is going to strengthen your journey, this journey called life, because we are all have gone through most of the things that are there in some way, shape, or form. So Debbie, is there any other way that people can get in touch with you? I know you said that they can get your book online, but is there any other contact information that you want to share with us?
They can reach me at my website, debbieadams.biz. BIZ. And they can also email me directly, and that is Debbie and Bud at iCloud.com.
At iCloud.com.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Very good. Is there any closing comment that you would give to our listeners or our viewers who are thinking about writing a book? Any insight that you want to share as we're closing out tonight?
If you have ever wanted to write a book or thought maybe, hey, why don't I write a book? Don't ever say I can't do that. I said that, and look at me. I mean, when I went to the retreat, she said 90% of the people on their deathbed say, I wished I had written a book. And so go for it. Go write your book. And if you need help on how to start writing a book, send me a message. I'll be glad to help you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Those are 3 powerful words there. That you can do it and go for it. Debbie, thank you so much for being with us tonight and for sharing, for reading from your book, and for sharing the promises in it and what they meant to you. And we thank you. We thank you so much for that. And folks, you got to do it. You got to do it. Those are other 3 very important words. Get the book. You get the book. Ruth, do you have any closing comments tonight?
Sure. Debbie, thank you again for joining us. We want to thank all our listeners and all our viewers. We are available as a podcast, but also on YouTube. We have many ways for you to rewatch the show if you're not watching it live. So we do have a replay on Saturday night here on Facebook Live and SIBN. We, like I said, we're also available on YouTube and as a podcast, so you can take us with you wherever you go. Follow us on social media. Just search for Authors Up Show. If you have any questions or would like for us to consider having you on the show, please email us at authorsup@gmail.com.
All right. You do that so well. I'm going to practice that so I can do it one week. Not soon, though.
No, okay. Not soon.
Thank you. And thank everybody for joining us tonight and for being with us. I saw a name, Maria P. Jones. Maria, thank you so much for being part of our audience tonight, and all of our other familiar names that we see that had popped in this evening. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Debbie, again. We look forward to your next project. So keep us in mind and keep us informed about that. And that is it for us for this evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Freeport, Bahamas, for being with us tonight. And, you never know what's going to happen on Authors Up. I would be very happy to tell you what we got going on next week, but I don't know. It's a surprise to me, too. So come back, join us. We'll be right back here at 7 p.m. next Sunday night for another edition of Authors Up. You guys make it an absolutely amazing week, and we look forward to seeing you next week right here, Sunday evening, 7 p.m. for another edition of Authors Up. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and thank you, Debbie, for sharing. That's it for tonight. God bless everybody. Have a good week.
Good night.